American Pride Roasters is coffee from the heartland of America. Based out of Des Moines, Iowa, APR Coffee brings history to your coffee mug every morning. Try the Jefferson, a smooth Nicaraguan coffee with real vanilla bean, or the Franklin, a French-roasted Colombian coffee. If you can't make up your mind, we have 2-pound samplers featuring all of our founding flavors. For all your coffee needs, check out AmericanPrideRoasters.com. Historically great coffee. Hi everyone, this is Susan Knowles, and this is a special edition of Stand for Truth Radio called Knowles on the News. This is where I have an opportunity to talk to you about the things that I find important in the news and some things that maybe are quite troubling in the news that I want to bring to your attention and discuss with you my feelings about it. Well, today was another day where a Planned Parenthood video was released, and just like the previous ones, it's horrendous. And this is the video number 7 of a former STEM Express employee speaking on camera. And as you might recall, STEM Express is the company that went in and got a temporary restraining order against the Center for Medical Progress, the people, the videographers of these Planned Parenthood videos, so that a video that the videographers had would not be released. And they were successful at not getting it released. They have also subsequently, broken all ties off with Planned Parenthood. I'm assuming they figure they might as well, cut their losses now while they still can, because it's looking bad. And each and every video that's been released, there's more information that comes out, and each and every time it looks a little bit worse, or a lot worse, as your frame of reference might be. I know today in watching this 7th video, it was just amazingly horrible. And again, as other people have said, sometimes it's quite hard to understand why people aren't, if there was ever a reason to be out in the streets, to say enough is enough, to not let this rest, to be calling every senator and every organization and be standing out in front of every Planned Parenthood office. This has got to be the case for it right now. There won't be another time in history like the moment and the opportunity we have at this moment to try and do something about this atrocity. And it is an atrocity. I've never in my life seen things so vile and disgusting and heard things so vile and disgusting as what's been in these Planned Parenthood videos. And anybody out there, I understand if you're pro-choice, I get that. This isn't about your rights to an abortion. This is about the rights of fetuses, babies, to be allowed to live, to not be murdered. I mean, I don't know how you can look at these videos, and I know some people haven't looked at it. It's too hard to look at. Well, if you're going to go out and have an abortion, then you need to know exactly what you are doing. And if you can look at these and say, I'm okay with it, and then go get an abortion, go forth and do it. But I don't know how anyone could look at this and not decide that there's got to be a better way. Adoption is available. And should there be exceptions for those people who have been raped or the life of the mother is in danger? I think there probably needs to be exceptions. But that's going to be, in my opinion, left up to the mother and how she feels about that particular thing. And that's where I say, that's the one time where I say, yes, the mother should have the decision on what happens. But in all of these other instances, I don't know how you can look at the videos and say that it's not murder. Today's video, as I said, again, has the former STEM Express employee talking about her experiences in the labs after an abortion. And she describes something today that I don't know how she got through it, because there's no way I would have ever been able to get through what she did. She describes a fetus that she could hold in her hands that had, a nose and body parts. I mean, a well-formed baby. And in this particular case, it was a little boy. And of course, STEM Express, as they show in the video, wants to extract the brain. Because after all, how valuable is that? And I mean value in terms of dollar value. It's one example of what they want to do in order to make money. And they claim that they're not making money. In any event, she describes walking over to the tray that the baby was in, and the other lab worker saying, hey, we want to get the brain out. So here, I'll start the cut, and basically you'll finish up. So she takes scissors and starts cutting, like maybe from the mouth area, starts cutting up towards the brain. And this poor woman is sitting there, the former employee, describing just how excruciatingly bad it was to be watching this. And again, as I say, I can't even imagine what she was going through, much less what the baby was going through. And I'll tell you why I say that in a minute. The lab technician says to her, watch this. And she takes something and presses on the heart of the fetus, and it starts beating. I'm not a doctor. I don't understand these things. Maybe it was something that, occurs after you die, and you can do that, and it's just sort of like not a natural reaction, but just, a reaction of the body as it reacts to the nerve cells and the nerve endings, that type of reaction. But all I know is, again, not a professional, as a doctor, but how does a heartbeat without the brain functioning? It doesn't make sense to me, because the brain controls everything. Again, unless that was sort of a response to nerve cells making the heartbeat. And anyway, the former employee watches the heartbeat and is just floored by what she's seeing. And then they go back to, again, cutting up the face to go towards the brain. And apparently the lab worker looks at the former employee and says, hey, can you finish up? And reluctantly, she says yes, and starts to finish the job by cutting all the way up through until the brain is reached. And then the brain is extracted, and she's left with this lifeless body. And she said it was so big that she had to pick it up off of the Petri dish. Here we have a human being on a Petri dish. But she had to pick it up and put it in the hazardous material, the waste box, if you will. And as she picked it up and put it in the box, she opens up the lid and notices all of these bodies in the box. And then she describes that the baby gets stuck on the lid of the box when she's trying to put the baby in. And the buttocks and the legs are hanging out of the box. Now, just, try to imagine the trauma that this woman is going through, much less, as I said, if the baby was alive or at some point was alive, what the trauma and the pain the baby was going through. But this former employee is in shock, no doubt, by what she's seeing, what she's experiencing, and what she's having to do. So she says then she opens the box back up and puts the body parts back in. And just kept thinking, I can't believe, that I'm doing this. And she said that was when she realized that she could no longer work there, that she was done. I would have been done the first day, and I probably would have starved to death if I needed the money, but there is no way that I could have done that even for 5 seconds. And the former employee goes on to talk about how, she wonders every time, or she did when she was doing that kind of work. She wondered every time, what could this baby have been? What would he have been doing at age 3, he or she? What did their parents look like? Would this have been the next president or a lawyer or, some other person that had some other job? And it was a life that was just ended because of the way that we look at life. And then, of course, we have that same doctor that we've seen before in videos sitting with her wine and her salad talking about things. And I just loved it because she had some euphemisms, instead of saying, yeah, we want the head intact because we want the brain. She comes up with all these medical terms. And I love how people are talking about, fetal demise. You mean killing? Murder? Fetal demise. Meaning, we're gonna give you a pill so that we can slowly kill your baby before we do the abortion. So by the time we do the abortion, all we're doing is taking out a dead body. But don't fret because, we didn't actually do the killing. The pill did. And let's not call it killing. Let's just call it fetal demise. Let's just call it what it is. It's murder. It's killing. And for all of these states that are looking to have, allowing abortions right up until the time of the abortion is despicable. And another one of the, supposed Planned Parenthood doctors are talking, or I don't know if she's a doctor, but she's an employee at least, sitting there talking about, oh gosh, one time, we had this person that came in and, she was, you have to get people dilated. I mean, a woman has to be really, really dilated, meaning they have to be dilated so that brain stays intact because otherwise, we're not going to get a good specimen. We're going to get parts, but we're not going to get that brain, which is, wow, so valuable. But she was talking about this one woman was so dilated that when she came in, basically the baby just popped out. Isn't that great? And at that point, you're going to tell me that that's not murder. When you deliver a baby and you kill it, how is that not murder? Please, somebody tell me how that is. We've got to wake up. I mean, we are really, I've heard it before, we're becoming a culture of death. It's despicable. And I usually sit and I say, gosh, don't worry. I know everybody's busy, la, 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 la. Okay, you know what? I'm changing my mind about that. I know you're busy. Everybody's busy. I'm busy. We have got to do more than sitting around going, oh my gosh, wasn't that video horrible? We have got to do more. And I don't mean just because it's the right thing to do. It is the God thing to do. We cannot sit here and be okay with this and feeling that we have no further responsibility than to just watch a video and go, oh, wow, that's bad. Or not watch the video because it's too hard to watch and say, gosh, I know it's happening, but I really can't watch that video. Get out and do something. Now, I know this weekend there are a lot of events going on. in front of Planned Parenthood organizations. Join one. There's also Reverend Patrick Mahoney, and you can find him on Periscope, you can find him on Facebook, you can find him on Twitter. He runs the Church on the Hill in Washington, D.C. He is always out in front of Planned Parenthood organizations all the time with his members, and they pray all the time. I recently watched where he was in Washington, D.C. at a site, a job site, construction site, where they're trying to build a Planned Parenthood building. And basically, they're out there praying that never happens, that it never goes through. Everybody can pray. Everybody's got time to pray. You know, I know we are busy, but we are responsible. And you may say, well, that's not my baby. It's not my fetus. It wasn't my choice. It doesn't matter. That baby is a child of God. We are responsible if we sit by and do nothing. You know, read Ezekiel 33, verses 2 through 11. If you're called to be a watchman and you do nothing to tell the people that there's a problem, if you don't sound the alarm when you're supposed to, then the blood will be on your hands. But if you're called to be a watchman and you do everything you can to warn the people and they still don't listen, then you've done all that you can do. So I would ask you to listen to your heart, to pray, to ask God, are you called to be a watchman? And maybe it isn't in the area of Planned Parenthood and aborting babies. Maybe it's something else. But you know what? We all are a watchman over something. Over some area. That's just my opinion. And if we sit back and don't do anything because we're afraid or because we don't have time or because we just don't feel like it, we're not going to answer to the people here. I'm not worried about answering to the people here, you know, whether or not they like me or, agree with what I'm doing. I'm worried about answering to God. That's more important. And I want to get it right, as I'm sure that you do. So please pray about it. At least give it some thought and decide what it is that you and your family are called to do. And it may just be giving a donation. Fine. People can use your money. The ACLJ needs your donation. Reverend Patrick Mahoney needs your donation. People like myself who's on the radio and doing this, we need your donations. You know, we do this because it's a public service that we want to do. And so do the other people. And we all need donations to keep going, to keep doing the work. So find an organization that you want to give to and give to them. Support them so that they can continue to be a watchman in whatever area they are called to be a watchman in. Now, another area that this week has really bothered me, you know, as a licensed psychotherapist, I've talked to you about this before. There have been times where I have parents dragging their kids into my office saying, you know, the teacher said my child needs medication. That should be your first warning. Teachers are not doctors. Teachers are not psychotherapists. Teachers are not psychiatrists. So if a teacher says to you your child needs medication, you need to think seriously about a different environment for your child. Now, they may say to you, I've seen these behaviors and I think you need to talk to somebody about them to see if there's an issue. I can understand that. I can have buy-in into that. But no teacher should tell you that your child needs to be medicated. earlier this week we saw that the FDA has approved of OxyContin for children as young as 11. Now, I can tell you also as a psychotherapist, I've had so many parents that have said to me, it's just easier for me if I give them a pill. Because then, basically what they're saying to me is, because I'm tired, because I'm overworked, and because I'm stressed out, that I don't have to do my job as a parent to correct the behavior. And if that's the way you feel, I'm not a parent, so I'm not sitting in judgment, but if you're getting to that point, then there is an issue that you need to look at. Because your job is to teach your children, model the behaviors that you want them to have. If you don't want them learning the behaviors from someone else, you have got to teach them. You have to spend the time with them in order to teach them the way that you want them to be taught. I know a lot of parents say, gosh, when they become teenagers, they don't listen to me anymore, and they start doing what their peers tell them to do instead of what I tell them to do. Well, as a parent, part of the job is to get them prepared for moving on into becoming teenagers and becoming adults. And if you don't spend the time with them in the beginning to lay that foundation, when it comes time for them to be in middle school and high school, which is per much for everybody, pretty much is a time that you are going to listen to your peers more than your parents. It's just the way it goes. It's kind of like nature. I know we don't believe in nature anymore, but it's nature. And so if you don't have that foundation that you've already laid, the one that says, there are going to be people in your life that are going to say one thing to you, but it doesn't always mean you should follow them. You should listen to what your parents are saying to you. We're teaching you the ways to keep you safe, et cetera, et cetera. So if you don't want to spend the time with them, then you're going to have more and more teachers and other professionals who say to you, your child needs to be medicated. And you just may take them up on it. I mean, with all the different side effects of OxyContin and what they do to people, adults, why would you want your child on that medication? I mean, they don't even really know what the side effects are going to be because they just approved this for children. I mean, children are different than adults. Children hormonally change. Their brain functions change. Their body changes. Everything changes. And there are medications that can stunt growth of the child if they're taking them. Why would you want to do that when simply you just have to take more time? I look at parents and I tell you, I don't know how you do it because it's a tiring job that requires a lot of repetition. Just when you think that your child has learned something, you have to repeat yourself the second time, third time, fourth time, fifth time, and on each time that they make that same mistake. And you're sitting there going, I just talked about this to you. Why are you doing this? Because that's what children do. And it's so much easier if you have a child in the classroom who's medicated. That doesn't cause problems. If you have a child who's at home, medicated, sitting in front of the TV, so you don't have to talk to them because you've talked to 12 million people during the day and you're just worn out. How easy is that for you? But is it in the best interest of your child? Earlier and earlier, we keep diagnosing children with things like ADHD I know the DSM-5 talks about a certain, particular age. I get all of that. But we're starting, and I've heard this when psychiatrists, I've heard this from parents who talk about what teachers have said and their doctors have said. We're seeing earlier and earlier that children, oh my gosh, I can see the ADHD symptoms, like 3 years old. I don't know of any child that's 3 years old that isn't running around, screaming, shouting, crying, tantruming, whatever the case may be, in a normal range. I mean, it's just normal. Now, there are exceptions, of course. But to be looking at a child at that age and saying, oh my gosh, if I could diagnose them with ADHD, I certainly would, but we'll have to wait till they're 7, and then you can bring them back to us and we'll put them on something. Maybe Adderall would be good to start. Come on. Not every child needs medication. And there are children who do need medication. I've seen them because I've worked with them. I've worked with children who are the extreme cases that, for example, without medication, physically could not stand still for 8 seconds. Those children are suffering. Those children need something to help them. But to take most children and look at them and say, oh my gosh, they need medication because they can't sit in their seat, or they're squirming, or they're talking to their classmate. I don't know about you, but everybody I know in school did the same thing. I mean, can you imagine medicating an entire classroom? And let me just tell you something. Perhaps that's the final goal. If we keep lowering the age that we can give children these types of medications, perhaps that is the goal. If we can just get people in a drone type situation where they're sitting there like little drones and they don't even know what's going on because they're so medicated. If we can get all the kids in that position, then we can teach them better, right? We can fill their brains with Common Core and other things, government manuals. You hear kids all the time going, oh, this is boring. Well, a lot of times it's boring because it is boring. And a lot of times it's boring is because it's not stimulating. And nobody knows what to do and how to make it that way. A lot of times, not in public schools, maybe private schools. But in public schools, they have one agenda, one plan. Here it is. Accept it. Be bored. Who cares? Maybe we need to start looking at the program and making it a different program. But children need to be taught. They need to be taught things that can keep them, interested. And medication is not the answer. And I would suggest to you parents, if you have people telling you your child needs medication, first thing you need to do, you need to take that seriously. You need to have them taken somewhere and observed and discuss this type of thing either with a psychiatrist, a psychotherapist, your doctor, pediatrician, whomever. But the second thing that you need to do is that you need to look and see what are you doing that may be causing this, or at least contributing to your child's behavior. And is it, in fact, a behavioral issue that you can do something about without medication on 9 times out of 10? Or is this a real example of your child needing medication? And again, I know I've said this and you're probably sick of hearing it, but if it comes down to that point, you can look at homeschool. And maybe you should look at homeschool before it gets to that point, but you certainly have an option if it gets to that point. Other areas in the news, I don't know if you happen to see that John McCain paid a visit this weekend to the Navajo Nation. He and Governor, I don't know if it's Duche, I don't know. Doesn't really matter, but he and a governor went to the Navajo Nation. And they went there as a way to talk about this new museum, a Navajo Code Talker Museum that they were hoping to build on the reservation. And these Navajo activists were sitting just outside of the meeting, and they were beating drums and chanting, probably hoping that the evil spirits that were there would go away. And if you've seen the video, and I have the video in my article that I wrote about it on The Blaze, if you're watching the drummers, the people sitting there beating the drums, the Navajo activists, all of a sudden they just stop. And you're thinking, what in the world is that? But they stop and they start to get up, and they're inside of a building. And the police try to literally keep them from coming outside of the building. Now, we've seen a lot that's been going on lately with the police officers and what people are saying. Some of it's true, some of it's not. I mean, it's sort of a truth lies somewhere in between. But needless to say, people are a little on edge about police officers these days. And here was another example where these people get up to leave the building, and the police officers try to keep them from leaving the building. Now, they don't try to take anybody down, or they don't pull out their weapons or anything else, but they sort of stand in the way of the doors so that these people can't get through. But eventually, they push through. And they run outside, and they're running. You can see them running after what appears to be a government SUV. It's the typical, stereotypical government SUV, the one that's black, probably tinted windows, looks very official. And so they start running, and they're filming as they're running towards this vehicle. And we learn that John McCain is in this vehicle. And as they run, the guy who originally is taking the film hands over the camera, probably the cell phone camera, to this other guy. And, obviously this other guy is the faster runner. So they give him the camera, and he just takes off running. And he's doing a great job kind of chasing this car down. And he gets to a certain point, and the car is sort of turning to leave the reservation. And this guy who's now got the camera yells out, "Get the hell off our land." I mean, it was just great. I don't know probably how many people in Arizona or elsewhere, John McCain came to where they're at, they'd be yelling the same thing, "Get the hell off our land." Now, I know that has nothing to do with John McCain, the war hero. That's John McCain, the politician, the rhino, who's been in office way too long, and in my opinion, needs to go. Time for John to, call it a day, go on retirement. You've put in your, what is it? I don't know. It seems like a lifetime, 100 years, but it's probably been about 30, who knows, that he's been in office. So people are frustrated. And why were these people frustrated? Well, maybe it wasn't such a good time to come in to talk about a museum, although probably talking about the museum was a way to just kind of say, gosh, we're sorry about that spill. That little EPA spill that took place near Durango, Colorado. And I don't know if any of you have been to Durango, Colorado, and the Silverton area. Oh, I knew this person before I'd gone to that area. He said to me, "Oh my gosh, Durango, and Colorado, it's God's country. You are just going to love it." I'm thinking, God's country? I mean, I kind of live in God's country, right? I mean, San Diego, the beaches. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how anything could compare to that. Well, I go to Colorado, I get there, I'm looking around, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is God's country. It's absolutely gorgeous. And you just feel so close to nature there. It's amazing. And the little town of Silverton, you can ride a train over from Durango to Silverton, but you have to get reservations way in advance because that's what everybody does. They ride that train into Silverton, kind of a ghost town, but it takes you back to the old the olden days. This little mining town, and they have all these great shops, and it's just a great place, all around great place. Well, and everybody there, river rafts. That's what they do. They just all day, every day, river rafting. Well, now in the Animas River, it's orange now. I think it's probably better now than it was a few days ago. But wastewater from the EPA's leak. And, we talk about, oh my gosh, there's just a little leak, the EPA's, oh gosh, we're so sorry. We didn't mean to do this. From my understanding, there was a gold mine there that they were going back to take some samples of to make sure that everything was okay, that nothing was leaking out of it, it wasn't going into the rivers or anywhere else. So they were going to take samples. And from what I understand, the Native Americans had said, please leave it alone. I mean, we know it's okay. You were here like 5 years ago. Everything was fine. Why come in and try to ruin something? Just leave it alone. But no. The government is here to help you, so let us do our jobs. There was supposed to be, the EPA was supposed to be decontaminating the sludge. Well, you have to give it to them. They did decontaminate the sludge. I mean, they did that job 100% well. But in the process, they released all of the wastewater into the creek, which later then flowed into the river. And it had all kinds of heavy levels of toxins, including lead and arsenic and mercury. Remember those things? Lead, arsenic, and mercury. Now, tell me what definition or what dictionary you're looking at that tells me that any of those three, and there were more, but any of those three toxins, how they're beneficial. Everything that anybody with any common sense and knowledge of metals and toxins and all that knows that those are highly toxic. You don't need to be a rocket scientist. You don't need to have a degree. You just know. I mean, even within the dentistry, they used to put mercury in the fillings, and they've taken those out because they found that they eventually leak and how horrible it is for your body, and on and on and on. And we even had the EPA administrator, Gina McCarthy, coming out and saying, we take full responsibility for our stupidity. No, she didn't say our stupidity, but I just added those. She said, it pains me to no end. I am absolutely, deeply sorry for this ever happening, or that it's ever happened. Gosh, I think everybody's deeply and sadly sorry that this ever happened, but it doesn't change anything. They came out and they're like, oh man, there's nothing, don't worry, the animals in the river, the fish, the animals who drink out of the river, everything is fine. It's not going to kill you, at least not today. But the contamination went to New Mexico, and now it's into Utah. And it's my understanding that the Navajo Nation says it's going to sue the EPA. Maybe it wasn't a great time to have a meeting on the reservation of the people who are going to sue you. Maybe they don't care that you're coming in there perhaps and trying to buy them off by giving them a Navajo code talker museum, which, where were you before the spill coming in there and talking about that? Did that come up before? I don't know. But I think, people have just had it. Now I'm understanding that to really clean up everything and to take care of the bill for this whole EPA government, big government, federal government fiasco is going to cost around $30 billion. That's almost as much as an Obama family vacation for 7 years. Actually, it's been a little bit less. The vacations were only around $42 million. No big deal. Anyway, every time the government comes and says, we're here to help, I think we all know by now, run. Run. If you need an example of that, remember FEMA during Katrina and how horrible that was. How they were late in getting there, how they basically, people needed everything under the sun, and FEMA's like, well, we'll be there just as soon as we can. Here we come to save the day. FEMA was called a national disgrace. And I think what was a national disgrace is what we've seen recently by the EPA. That's a national disgrace. And that $30 billion is going to come out of your pocket and my pocket. Because it's the government. The government gets paid through taxpayer dollars. Unless somebody wants to take it out of their pockets, George Soros, and give it to them, it's going to come out of the taxpayer dollars. Right out of your pocket. But the EPA, they have other plans as well. And again, if the EPA has a plan, it's going to work really, really well. And there's no reason at all for you to have any fear. Run. Now, the EPA has decided that we need a food program that's going to prevent waste in food and waste before it even happens. So it's a kind of a waste prevention program. Sounds good. Who wants to waste food? There are people who need food, homeless people, other people. You don't want to be wasting food. But you don't want to have the government tell you exactly what you should do. They've gotten it down to a science there at the EPA. They want you to prepare less food. They want you to encourage the people that you eat out with to make sure that they, get a little doggy bag and carry everything home. And one of the things that they've come up with is so brilliant. Again, it is the government. Is that they want you now to go trayless. Trayless. See, because they've done this study that, I think it was a huge study, 25 colleges, 25 college campuses. And basically, the study said that by removing trays at the dining halls, the amount of food wasted was reduced 25 to 30%. My thoughts about that is, perhaps they didn't take into account that frustrated students may have opted to just eat elsewhere to avoid the balancing act of carrying their food without a tray. Just food for thought there, but who wants to eat in a place where you're juggling everything and trying to get to your table? It's easier just to go someplace else that'll give you a tray. And another thing that they wanted to do too is they want to instruct the general public and restaurant cooks not to over purchase food. And here's what that means to you. Only purchase the food that you'll need when you need it. So only purchase what you need when you need it. In other words, they refer to this type of purchasing as just-in-time ordering. That means don't be planning for a rainy day, an earthquake, or anything else. You don't need to do that. Just buy the amount of food that you need right now. Because we got FEMA to help you if you run out of food in an emergency, right? Ask those people from Katrina. But in their little just-in-time ordering system, my thoughts are, unfortunately, the just-in-time system could leave you without food or water just in time for an earthquake, flood, or other emergency. Really, how ridiculous is that advice? Again, it's the government. Run. Now, the final topic that I want to talk about in the time that we have remaining, there's a case in Kentucky where a county clerk has refused to issue a marriage license to a gay couple, and a lawsuit was filed, and subsequently the Kentucky county clerk lost and was told to start issuing a marriage license for the gay couple that wanted it and for other same-sex couples. And the clerk had asked for a delay and saying, why don't we just hold off? I want to appeal this, and let's delay your order. And the judge denied that, but then turned right around and basically said, emotions are pretty high here, and if we allow this to go, if we allow the order I just made to go forward, then the favorable legal ruling would have no teeth for those in the gay community who are looking to get married, and it would prolong the likely violation of their constitutional rights. However, I'm going to go ahead and decide on my own that everything is on hold until the appeal. So basically, the Kentucky clerk got what she wanted. Now, my question is right away, we're kind of looking at this as the rights of the gay couple, but nobody's really looking at anybody else's constitutional rights. And I say that basically the questions are many in this debate. And first, whose First Amendment rights or constitutional rights are more important? And secondly, should the United States Supreme Court decision be followed by the state of Kentucky, since the court clearly overstepped its judicial boundaries by creating law rather than merely interpreting it? We've had people that have come out and said, critics like Ted Cruz, for example, that basically what the Justice Anthony Kennedy of the Supreme Court did was he created law because, as you recall, there was no definition of marriage in the U.S. Constitution. You could find it in various state constitutions, but not in the United States Constitution. And the way I look at it is that the clerk has rights under the Free Exercise Clause of the First Amendment. It has to do with religious freedoms. And in my opinion, all along, the gay couples have had a 14th Amendment right, which says you can have equal protection under the law, which people would claim, well, that only entitles them to a civil union. Well, that's my opinion. And in fact, what, Kennedy came down on was the 14th Amendment, saying, that they should have the same rights as people of the opposite sex under the 14th Amendment. So in my mind, we're looking at saying whose rights are going to trump somebody else's rights. Is it going to be the First Amendment right of the county clerk, or is it going to be the 14th Amendment right of the gay couple? Really, that's what we're looking at. And we have the Liberty Counsel who are representing the clerk in Kentucky. And they want to see this through because I think they really feel that, the court has overstepped its boundaries and that there are, a lot of issues here regarding constitutional rights and should they both be treated equally, or should we have one right that's more valid, more important than the other? And, looking at constitutional rights, there isn't one that's more important than the other. They're all important. We could just tell Obama that and get him to understand that. And the courts lately, then perhaps, we would have a country that we would recognize again. So I found it very interesting, that we continue to have these type of arguments over whether or not the county clerk should have to issue a license. And I wrote about it, another article on the Blaze in the contribution section, just like the other one. But I wrote about it, and I've had people say, well, if you don't like what the government's doing, you shouldn't be working for the government. So, two things there. So if I'm a Christian, I need not apply to a government job because my constitutional rights might be violated, right? That's what you're telling me. So Christians need not apply. Well, that doesn't make sense. And I'm sure you know that before I even say that. Doesn't make sense. Because no matter what job you have with the government, your rights should not be violated. In fact, the First Amendment and religious freedoms talks about the government not violating those rights and not establishing a religion, and on and on and on. So it prevents your rights from being violated. So why, just because I have the religious beliefs that are protected under the Constitution, why shouldn't I be able to have a job within the government and be assured that my constitutional rights aren't going to be violated? Period. What I find is interesting is that up until around the mid-19th century, common law marriages were recognized. You didn't have to get a marriage license in order to get married. And I understand, why some of that took place, why we need marriage licenses in the eyes of the state. You want to know who's a family unit. If something occurs, let's say, and one person in the marriage leaves and you have children, who can you go after legally, which there are other laws that you could look to for that. But, states' rights, looking at that, they say, well, we need to know who's married and who isn't. Okay. And also, it's obvious that the states wanted a revenue. So if everybody's getting married, or you can make those people in common law marriages now have to get a marriage license to get married, you're going to make revenue. And what do governments do best? They make revenue. Or in this case, in what we've seen for the last 7 years, they make revenue and they spend it out of existence so that you have nothing left over. And then some. But So I get it. I get that, the government wants to make money. Well, and you've heard the argument before, just get out of the marriage business, government. You don't need to be in our business. And they don't. And here's why. It should be up to any organization, whether it's a Christian organization, a Muslim organization, whatever religious beliefs or whatever religion you make up. If they want to marry you, and that's where you want to get married, you should be able to do that. You should be issued a certificate that says, I got married at XYZ organization. And you walk down to your friendly government office and you say, here's my certificate. And they say, that'll be $15, please. Because they're going to register that or record it, whatever you want to call it. And they can file it. And they don't need to, at that point, say, oh, are you a same-sex couple getting married? Well, we may not issue the license then because it goes against our constitutional rights. Or, oh, you want to marry because why? Whatever. You don't need to know. The state doesn't. All the state needs to know is that you're 18 years old, of sound mind, and maybe a couple other exceptions, and that you're getting married. You're two human beings. We have to qualify that. Two human beings over the age of consent that want to get married. And that there are no other legal issues why they can't. And so, done. You got married in XYZ and church or organization, and that's between you and God. All we want to do now, we want to make our $15 or however much it is. We want to make our $15, so we're going to call this a need to register your certificate. You can make money a whole bunch of ways with the state. I mean, they're good at coming up how to, take the last dime out of your pocket, right? So they can do that. Call it whatever you want. And leave the marriage between God and the people that get married, We don't have to bring religious ideas into it at all if we don't want to, because that's between the church or the faith-based organization or one you've made up, calling it a marriage and accepting it under their terms and under their religious beliefs. And in that way, the county clerk's religious beliefs, protected under the First Amendment, don't have to be violated. The same-sex couple's beliefs, under their beliefs and protected now by the 14th Amendment, in this last U.S. Supreme Court case, their rights don't have to be violated. So then we have people on both sides of the argument who can be happy, who can walk out of there having a marriage that then is recognized within their state, can be recognized federally, and the states and the federal government can even order the states to recognize the marriage in other states as well. Problem solved. Will be no constitutional rights even come up in a question as having been violated, because there's no government involvement until after the fact. I mean, in a lot of instances, it would be great if the government only became involved, if at all, after the fact. It would cut down on a lot of cases, a lot of time, a lot of money spent, and a lot of going back and forth, with the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, will this argument succeed in this appeal? I don't know. I have my doubts, especially in the times that we find ourselves in, and with this administration, and with the courts just basically saying, hey, we're going to do whatever we want to do. We want to make law, we'll make law. So, perhaps they'll come up with something else that's not even in the appeal this time. And, right now it's just going to go to the appeals court. So we'll see. We'll see what the appeals court does, and if it makes its way to the Supreme Court eventually, maybe the appellate court and the Supreme Court will just create new law and say, gosh, I came up with something new, and now we're going to apply it to this. You really cannot depend on the courts anymore, or any other branch of government, to stay within their limits. This is why we had 3 branches of government in the first place. The checks and balances. Well, guess what, folks? There are no more checks and balances. We have a court who is creating law and doing whatever they want. Again, they created the definition of marriage that was not in the Constitution. We have a president who signs executive orders that create law. That is not part of the function of the President of the United States, but nobody wants to do anything about it because, after all, nobody wants to be called a racist when you go to the President and say you're acting outside of the scope of your office. And then we have a Congress who is supposed to make law that basically seems to run, especially the GOP, you're in the majority, you run from every challenge. Oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And they end up at the very last part of every argument saying, gosh, we thought about it, we really tried. No, we didn't, but we really tried, and we just can't do it. But don't worry. We have another thing that we're going to try. When we get to this next bill, we're going to put it in there, and they'll have to take it. Well, we've done that about how many times now? And every time we get to that stage, it's okay, the government's going to shut down. GOP, it's your fault. And what do we see? The GOP runs again, because God forbid that anybody would think that they were doing the right thing, and it just so happened to cause the government to close down. We can't have that on our backs. No, what we would rather have on our backs is the fact that we were cowards and we didn't do anything that we promised the American people that we were supposed to do. That's always better, right? Well, you've heard what some important things that have been in the news that I wanted to talk about. There's going to be a ton more, as there always is. So keep looking for these Knowles on the News specials. Also, check out my articles that I write and post at theblaze.com in the contributions section. The changes that occur every day in the news are just going at a rapid rate. We need to keep aware of things. We need to become activists in our own rights and those things that we can do and that we're called to do. So I hope that you will think about all those things. Hope that you will keep the faith and keep doing what you do. So glad that you're here. Until next time, take care and God bless.